right, thank you all for coming today. We're going to get started. It's a couple minutes after 10. So we're going to start this card meeting with some brief introductions. So I'll go first and then we'll go this way around the room. But I'm Jennifer Kahn. I'm the Public Health Engineer for Washtenaw County Environmental Health. I'm also the Executive Director of CARD and acting as moderator today.
I'm Roger Rail, Chair of CARD and Chair of Sire Residents for State Water.
Beth Collins, Secretary of CARD and resident of Ann Arbor.
Shauna Milkey, Ann Arbor resident.
Jeff Ainer, Ann Arbor resident, Ann Arbor City Council, Ward 1.
Kathy Knoll, SIO trustee.
Jack Eaton, Ann Arbor City Council.
Christine Alexander, EGLE Water Resources Division Permit Section.
Jessica Stiles, EGLE Water Resources Division Permit Section.
Kristen Schmakel, I'm the Environmental Health Director with the Washtenaw County Health Department.
Dan Hamill, EGLE Jackson District, I'm the project manager for the Gelman site.
Kevin Lund, EGLE, Jackson District.
Brian Nagel, Assistant AG, signed to the case.
Bob Bailey, SIO resident.
Mike Moran, Ann Arbor Township Supervisor and Vice Chair of CARD.
All right, we'll jump to the back row.
Charlie Nielsen, previous Township Supervisor of SIO.
Jared Walter, Tetra Tech.
Hey, we call with Tetra Tech.
Kathy McDonald with the University of Michigan.
All right. Thank you all for coming. We'll next move to the approval of minutes from the previous October meeting. I just want to mention, if anyone hasn't already signed it, there is a sign-up sheet rolling around in our agendas up here on the table, if anybody needs one. So I'll pass it to Beth to do the minutes.
Oh, yes. So this is just for a board vote only, and I move to approve the minutes from October of 2019. Do I have a second?
Support.
Mike? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, then minutes are approved.
All right. And then I want to take a few minutes to briefly go over a new format and order of meeting for CARD meetings. So in the interest of keeping the meetings moving and getting through the entire agenda and making sure everybody is touched on with the making sure they hear what they need to before we run out of time, I'm going to be a better moderator and more strict with time management. So if you reach the end of your time, we're gonna have to stop it. So in that interest, we're gonna ask that questions be held until the end of someone speaking. So like with EGLE Updates, let them get through their entire update, get through all of it, and then there'll be time for discussion at the end. If for some reason time doesn't permit discussion, we can table it to the end of the meeting. But we want to make sure we hit on all the action items and that the updates are given before we diverge into or digress into other topics or conversations. So in that interest, I'm going to ask that you, again, hold questions until the speaker is done with their topic. And just to be respectful and realize that we might have to agree to disagree or table something until a next meeting. So I will be keeping a list of action items to follow up on, whether it's the next meeting, next 2 meetings, or in a quarter, or even in a year. So we'll try to get a better handle on that. So with that, the first order of business is old business or action items from previous meetings that we'd like updates on. So with that, I'll send it over to Dan Hamill with EGLE.
The number one is the status of the Allen Creek Drain Sampling Report. The draft is done. In fact, I was going to send it out to Evan's group. We are meeting with Evan Pratt and the staff of Washtenaw County on Friday, and the city on Friday here to discuss the Allen Creek Drain Sampling Report. I mean, I just couldn't. As you know, I'm not the IT person, and I didn't have the help I needed to pull all the PDFs together as one report. So that'll go out here this afternoon to them in the draft form. We'll discuss it on Friday. It's just a summary report. It is, has tables of the data, has a figure where the samples were collected with the analytical on the figure to make it a lot easier to read and have that information without going to the tables. And it's how we did, what procedures we followed to basically take the samples and where we took them. At this point in time, again, we will be discussing that on Friday. It does not have, if you want to say, evaluation of information. It's just a summary report. The next step after is to take this report, start talking about what does it mean, where we go from here. And that process is going to start on Friday with Evan Pratt. So the trend analysis is the number 2.
I had a question on that.
Question, yes.
Just get them the same.
This was the end of this item, I thought, okay, go ahead.
Well, whatever. That's your
We'll wait till we'll get through them all and then
I'm just okay. The trend analysis, the status of the trend analysis review. Again, I appreciate your patience on this, but we are still evaluating, doing that trend analysis. We have, again, prioritized what we're doing. Just a little background, we had, based upon your request, stakeholders' request, and then our own internal, where we going with implementing the 7.2, we had asked Gelman to provide a trend analysis of how they would, how they would do trend analysis on monitoring wells, with the idea of using that trend analysis to implement the modification of the sampling plans that is going to be required when we implement the 7.2 criteria in the CJ, when that CJ is modified. Again, it's been a long process. We're still in that confidential negotiations with modifying that. There's little parts of that relate to the trend analysis of how we are using that. So we have decided, we are evaluating that and have decided to kind of bring that out after we get closer to the CJ modification. But we are planning on using that to help us implement modifying the sampling plan that are currently in place for the current CJ. With the 7.2, we're going to have to modify those. There's currently three sampling plans: the eastern area sampling plan, monitoring plan, the western area monitoring plan, Little Lake monitoring plan, sampling plan. Whether there'll be three again will be related to how that 7.2 is implemented. But again, I appreciate your patience on that, but that's where we are right now. We're not going to bring out our evaluation of that until we're closer to the implementation of the 7.2. Now, we have done some work on it. We have already received comments back from Roger, from Dr. Lemke. We've even we had agreed to some of those comments, taken some of those comments back to Gelman, in the sense, for example, they had, Dr. Lemke and Roger had identified, we also noticed it, once they identified it, that they had wrong data on, I think, monitoring well MW73. So we went back to Gelman. I mean, we knew that was wrong data, what they were using, so they have corrected that. And again, that'll be corrected when we get the package, and when we send our review out, that'll be identified. But that's where we are, the status of that right now. The next bullet is on old business. Is there a plan for permanent shallow groundwater wells near West Park yet? We are still evaluating that. Allen Creek drain sampling review, that's a part of that evaluation. We have been doing some other evaluations related to groundwater levels and evaluation of groundwater levels that we haven't brought forward to this group yet. We intend to do that. Again, we are going to be discussing that on Friday a little bit with the Washtenaw County. Once that's done with the local unit of government, we will start bringing out pieces of work, to show what we have been doing and what that evaluation as far as permanent monitoring wells and shallow groundwater in the West Park area, and then other areas what we are planning on doing. But you will have a chance to, as we've identified, maybe not as quickly as you have pointed out to me as you would like, but you will get a chance to comment on that. Once that starts, we won't jump forward like you have. Told me what some of the problems that you have seen, and us providing information and you having time to comment back. So we're aware of that, and we'll try to do a better job there. But again, we're going to start that, if you want to say that, shallow groundwater well discussion as we discuss the evaluation of the West Park sampling data and where we go from there. That's going to start on Friday with Evan. Evans Group, Jenni and Kristen, and also then Tetra Tech and Brian, the city is at that meeting too. So it's not just small groups. It's, it's groups that represent U.S. stakeholders. The next one is what criteria will EGLE be using for shallow groundwater wells? You had identified 1,900, 280, or 100. I was a little confused by this one, but the criteria that would be used for shallow groundwater for this site is going to be related to the exposure pathways, whatever exposure pathways we are evaluating. The 1,900, undoubtedly, you are referencing the vapor intrusion pathway that we had identified as a 1,900 potential screening level for groundwater, shallow groundwater in contact with the basement. If you remember, that 1,900 was generated after there was an emergency rule where EGLE had set a 29 parts per billion screening level. During that process, that first 6 months when that was implemented, we got comments back and reevaluated the information and found out from the comments, mainly from stakeholders' comments, external comments, that some of the assumptions that were utilized to calculate that in the vapor intrusion, EPA's vapor intrusion equations were incorrect. So after reevaluation, it realistically comes up to closer to 1,900. That is in the proposed rules change. That proposed rules change, not only that vapor intrusion, but other criteria, other screening levels, has not been implemented yet. That started back in 2016, and it's still just a proposed package. It hasn't gone any further. So right now, the current criteria, as on the books, has dioxane as not likely to volatilize. Now, we understand that it is a volatile. There may be some instances with that, so we're keeping an eye on that. But as far as the pathway, the vapor intrusion pathway, we're thinking that it's going to be closer to 1,900 as a screening level of groundwater in the basement. When that will be implemented, I can't say. That's past. That's more of a program path forward for not just the vapor intrusion pathway, but all criteria screening levels. The 280 undoubtedly is being referenced as the GSI, is currently the GSI criteria. That is currently in place. That criteria it's really a Rule 57 water resources criteria. It's in Rule 57. And it basically in Part 201, it is implemented as a criteria in reference to Rule 57, meaning we didn't set that criteria. It's set already with the Water Resources Group, and it's basically the criteria that's in their non-drinking water criteria for cancer risk under Rule 57. That is the current GSI criteria. If you remember, though, under the current CJ, the GSI, although isn't highlighted significantly, and it's referenced really as a 2800. That was the old criteria was 2800. So realizing that it is currently 280 and will be implemented as 280. Under the new, modified CJ, that undoubtedly is what you were referencing there. A caveat to that, there is also a criteria related to if the surface water, the GSI criteria, if the surface water body is utilized as a water source, then the GSI criteria goes from 280 again down to 3.5. That decision is related to basically a evaluation by Water Resources and RRD on whether in the site-specific conditions, site-specifically, whether that could be as low as 3.5. So that has not been decided yet. So I will come with an update when that decision is made. But currently it's 280, and we're implementing going to be, implementing the 280 as things progress with the modifications in the CJ. And then the 100 ppb, I was a little confused. Is that your number
No, that's
related to your evaluation of shallow groundwater? That number again has not been discussed as far as the screening level or criteria. So it really, I don't know how to answer that. It could be considered. We've passed that on to the people, the toxicology group, and those types of people. So it's there. It's available for as these decisions are being progressed as counterpoints, as thinking points to say, hey, is it, are we utilizing the correct equations? Are we utilizing the correct assumptions? And so that's we have passed that on, and they have taken a look at that. So. That's all I had for the old business updates.
Let me interject something too as far as vapor intrusion concerns, is that we're all talking about criteria, or Dan's talking about criteria that might be put into a rule or a number to look up and judge from there. Where in the last lame duck session there were some significant amendments to Part 201, and one of those amendments concerned vapor intrusion and how a responsible party can basically show that the vapor intrusion is or isn't an issue. And I don't know that anybody's really had to work their way through that yet in an actual site. So there could also, if vapor intrusion becomes an issue that is actually Gelman has to evaluate in a building as part of this site, the statute might give them other options other than just simply comparing it to a number that we calculate. Just to give people a heads up on that.
All right, Vince, you've been waiting patiently.
So, thanks for the update on that. So, I did a tour with Evan Pratt since our last meeting. And we did a tour of the Glendale area where we
passed that on to us.
Yeah, we had a survey done by the neighbors. We were looking at what's the potential for groundwater getting into basements in this neighborhood, since it's got such a large number of wet basements. I would say that there's probably a good chance of that. He wasn't sure. He was a little surprised at the fact that we met a homeowner who said, there's no question, she's got groundwater coming up into her basement. There were 2 basements that were dug in this neighborhood. They both filled up with water within a week. I have photographs of that. So I think it's a real concern on the west side. This is kind of a high location for the west side. This isn't even
high elevation.
High elevation, I'm sorry.
All right, so Vince, I think correct me if I'm wrong, the EGLE hears that concern. That's why they are meeting with Evan Pratt's office Friday. So
What time's the meeting on Friday?
2 or 3.
Yeah, we're still trying to figure out a time.
Well, it's at 3, we're hoping to push it back.
Try to push it up.
Push it up, yeah.
So in the interest of, because we've used up our time, of keeping the meeting
How much time did they
moving,
use?
we are right at the 10:20. This whole old business should end at 10:20, and it is 10:20.
Yeah, but
Right now.
how much of the 5 minutes did they use?
We are still moving forward.
No, I
I was going to let Jack ask his
Because
question.
the whole idea of this new format was to compress it.
Right.
I thought
So you can
I
talk
compressed,
about
but I
it,
talked too
or-
much. So.
Keep it going.
Yeah, I think we should keep going.
In my heart, I felt I compressed it.
Well, I will say that the whole idea of having more things on the, monitoring the drains is not monitoring the groundwater.
Absolutely right.
And the slower we get those permanent monitoring wells in down gradient, the worse it's going to be. So dinking around with the drain is not going to help too much. Besides, the drain is surface water, correct? The drain considered surface water?
Not more
Dan, somebody know?
Not necessarily.
In the EGLE?
The under-
Are drains considered surface water?
Yes.
Okay, so the interface to surface water of 280 or 3.5 is where it enters the drain.
We can check it. We can.
Roger, there are several ways to be in compliance to evaluate GSI. And it's the compliance point is not necessarily that way. There are multiple ways that a party can evaluate and prove that they are within compliance with GSI. So,
Okay, so I'm gonna pull us back.
Yep.
We'll check into that for a future meeting. We'll
Yep.
also make sure we get an update on this Friday's meeting at the December meeting. This is November. Jack, did you really quick have a
Yes,
question to add?
so the meeting about the wells near West Park, will there be city representation?
Yes.
Friday?
Yeah.
Yes,
Right.
Brian and Tetra Tech, I believe, is going to be there today.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
I just have a statement, I'll be brief. I think that it would be useful to the people who are trying to work on this CJ modification to have the trend analysis and the sampling reports prior to our next joint session.
You do that, they're public.
So that's been become part of this.
April.
What, you mean the?
Well, you said that you were going to wait to do the trend analysis review until closer to these self-imposed deadlines for this consent judgment modification.
Right.
That's true. The conclusions that we reach are informing our decisions in the process that we're involved with in conducting confidential discussions. So we didn't think it was appropriate to be talking about that outside of the confidential discussion.
Okay. But we could ask our counsel for that information, for your conclusions?
The process is going to, the process, how it was for the previous CJ, is the CJ was modified. The monitoring plans are already referenced in the CJ, and then after the CJ is modified to implement the 7.2, that's when we finalized the monitoring plans. That's when, basically, before, it was that the Gelman would submitted monitoring plans and we approved them. And after negotiations of how to implement the 85 at that point. But that's the way we see it right now. It's not going to be a prior to. It's not going to be included in the modified CJ. It's going to be referenced there, and then afterward it will be like a work plan, monitoring plan that's submitted to us for approval for the different locations.
I want to make a clarification on testing the Allen Creek drain, is that in lieu of doing these permanent wells, this was an effort to have a simple way to look at a quick and dirty analysis of groundwater near the surface. And when it came back positive, I think we were all pretty surprised by that. That's concerning that, we have a lot of homes with wet basements on the west side, and this could be a real problem and a near-term issue, not 30 years down the road. This could be next year, 5 years from now.
Yep. That's why CARD's been pushing for them to move forward with that. Thank you, Ben. All right. They're scanning, making its way around. And for anyone who came in late, there is a sign-up sheet, so you can locate that. That'd be great. All right. EGLE business. I'm going to ask you to truncate things a little bit. Van, to get back on track. So thank you.
Okay. The next EGLE update related to the 2019 residential well sampling. Very quickly, we had a program in 2019 of about, I believe, around 117 plus or minus samples were collected in the different areas around the plume area. We had a new detection of 1,4-dioxane out on Breezewood Court, if you remember. We had some detections of, this year we also implemented doing additional VOCs at selected locations. I want to make it quite clear that it wasn't just an EGLE decision of where we sampled for VOCs, where we went for these. It's a decision with Washtenaw County, with Jenni, with Kristen. That's how we come up with where the wells to be sampled and what parameters to use. So we had some detections on Liberty Avenue of other VOCs. In response to that, and we also had another detection on Elizabeth Road at a well that had not had 1,4-D previously. And so in response to those new detections, we went back out and resampled, did some confirmatory samples in August at the Breezewood Court area, at the Liberty Road area, and then Jenni finished up the 2019, Washtenaw County finished up the 2019 Elizabeth Road sampling in September. So they resampled that well that had a new detection. And as far as Breezewood Court, we did, it was a 1 ppb dioxin detection back in April. And in our August sample, we did not confirm that. We had got non-detect. It was the same method. Both were sent to the EGLE laboratory, one to the drinking water lab, one to the environmental lab. But it's the same method, the 8260 SIM method for both analysis. The Liberty Road samples we collected, we again did not confirm the positive results on Liberty Road that we had of some of the other volatile organics in our August sampling. So we didn't confirm it. On Elizabeth Road, it was confirmed in the September sampling that confirmed what had been previously done, that new well did also have a positive detections. I believe it was correctly, it was a 2 ppb or 1 ppb. But we had the same range in Elizabeth Road for all the ones historically that had been positive, 1 to 2 ppb. Is still up there, and the new one confirmed then in September of the new well again was 1 ppb. So that's what. For 2019, what we had done and what we had completed. All that data is on the web page. I will have the residential well updated on the web page here within the next month, where you can go into an Excel spreadsheet, the PDF of an Excel spreadsheet, look at an address, and get the 2019 data. The surface water sampling, if you remember, we continued surface water sampling and will continue surface water sampling in the future. We've committed to that. We had some new locations that we sampled. We had the range of concentrations in the unnamed Trib and the Honey Creek. And then we had a new Honey Creek up near West Huron Road there, right very much closer to the Huron River. We confirmed a 1.2 ppb up there. And then we also sampled off the bridge across the in the Huron River, and did not have a detection of dioxin, in the middle of the river across the bridge there. Listen, I always forget the name.
River Drive?
That bridge, you guys.
That's what I encourage you to sample from.
Across the road bridge. I can drive right to it, but don't ask me the name of it. What we are planning, what we are planning, I was right in the middle of the river there. I dipped it right there. What we are planning is, as we have committed to, we will continue our surface water sampling program at those same locations. Trying to do 2 times a year, but at least once a year in 2020 as staff and time and schedule permits. The Allen Creek drain, the next one is extra drain sampling. Again, as I pointed out on Friday, we're having started the discussions of the summer report and where do we go from here utilizing that information. So we will see where that takes us. And the input will be not only EGLE, will be the city and the county. EGLE quarterly report, again, I appreciate your patience. I have not concentrated on that with all the other items coming up. All the data that we put into a quarterly report has been posted. My plan is to, after this meeting, is get to that report here before the end of the year, to start that process again of quarterly reports. We had a little format change. I'm not quite sure now whether there will be a format change. We had additional discussions of that, and it was just changing format. It really didn't. It was someone's opinion about a format. So I believe that at least this one is going to be the very similar format to what we have had when we were generating those for stakeholders and the EPA. The last one report was back in the end of May 2019. And then the residential well sampling proposed in 2020. We have, if you remember, I want to remind you that based upon suggestion by Jenni and discussions with Washtenaw County, we've implemented kind of program to determine where we're going to sample, yearly sample residential wells with a buffer zone. Basically, we've come up, Jenni suggested a buffer zone of 1,000 feet, and from the known estimated plume area. And so we utilized that this year for 2020. And so along with that, we've also decided, because we had some positive detections that were outside, new detections, we're going to go back to those same areas, where in the past, some of those areas were done every other year. We're going to go ahead and do next year, take those same areas because we had those new detections, and we've added any new areas related to that buffer zone that we're going to be utilized. I point that out is we are getting questions, and I'm sure local units of governments and even maybe card members are going to get questions related to how do I get my well sampled under our program there. And so we wanted to basically identify that 1,000-foot buffer that we're going to utilize to be able to say apples to apples to apples of yes, we will sample you in that area, or no, you're outside that area. At this point in time, we're not going to sample. So, and I believe with adding, doing the same, I think we're up to with 2 times a year, we're up to about 215 samples next year, 215 to 220 samples. This year we did about 117. So we are continuing that, and we'll continue that in the future.
Residential?
Yes, those are residential. Those aren't the monitoring wells. Those are residential wells. That, again, if you remember how we do it, is EGLE hires Washtenaw County to implement the sampling, and then Washtenaw County sends it to the EGLE water quality laboratory, drinking water lab. And like I said, all the wells are picked, locations are picked in discussions with Washtenaw County group. It's not just EGLE saying we're going to do these, or Washtenaw County we're going to do these.
Any questions on Dan's update items?
The basis for the 1,000 feet from the 1 part per billion. So where there's been 1 part per billion detected, that will now be the new edge of the county map, correct?
Correct.
But it's not yet updated on the county side here. Because it's this property here, up here in the, off Breezewood.
Correct.
And I did see
So
a
I
temporary
did take
map
into
of
account
that.
Breezewood and the Huron River, or Honey Creek, excuse me, when I did the 1,000-foot buffer for next year.
Right.
I just trying not to update the map multiple times per year, so we'll do an update.
But I did
at the end
see
of
a
this
county
year,
map
next year.
that had this bubbled out. I can't find it now.
Here's an internal document.
Because, you know, as we pointed out before, had the 1,000 feet been applied to this, it probably wouldn't have included the hit. So thank goodness you went out farther.
Trying to be conservative. And now we're 1,000 feet farther from that also, so.
I'm just saying, if had that criteria been applied at this map, it wouldn't have found that. And this is closer to the creek, actually, than it is the plume. So this hit here, that was sampled
That
once.
map is outdated. We have a more recent map.
This is the one on the card website, through the county.
Okay, I'll check into that, because
Yeah.
we also had a detection at the monitoring well just north of 94, off of West Delhi.
Yeah, so, and it's just a
That
matter
map
of
is-
keeping things up to date. But I'm saying
Oh,
that
is that why?
Yeah, that's a fact sheet.
this hit on this well, this homeowner well, could have come from the creek, because it's closer. And we know that's a losing part of the creek. So that relates to an upcoming item for what's the discharge limit going to be in the new permit? Because we already have, with 7 part per billion discharge, we've already had a hit on a homeowner well. And we don't know what's going to happen to that dioxin. It's going to go up. We could have a better indication if the state and the county used what the city uses, the 522 method, that's the new approved method from EPA, they can detect less than 1 part per billion, but have a heads up around the peripheral of where the dioxin is moving before it gets to 1 part per billion. So we know when we need to do a little more sampling, more frequent sampling or something like that. Instead of using the homeowner wells as the first level of monitoring wells.
The primary purpose of monitoring the homeowner well is to make sure that the people drinking the water are protected.
Yeah, that's fine, but
Okay, just want to make sure that we reiterate that.
there's been so many instances in the past where homeowner wells ended up being the first hit because we don't have enough monitoring of the dioxane, of Gelman's dioxane in our waters of the state. And that lets them off the hook. They didn't have to do the extra monitoring to prevent the hit on the homeowner wells.
Great.
That's my statement.
So yeah, I just wanted to make a comment that when Bob Bailey and I discussed with Evan Pratt additional tests along Maryfield Park area, he was supportive. And I think, you know, one of the things we'd like to see is if we could narrow down where this contamination is coming from in that area. And so he supported that, and I would like to just put on the record that, you know, we support that as well as maybe a final effort in this regard, and encourage maybe permanent wells, because we'll find out maybe where this contamination is coming from.
That you do know that the Water Resources Commissioner has the authority to ask for permanent wells.
Well, he's supportive of it, told me and Bob.
Why is it taking so long?
I don't know, we have to ask him, I guess.
Why is he not at the meeting, this meeting, or any of the current meetings?
They have a conflict. He was gracious enough to meet with Bob and I, and then meet with me and do a tour in the neighborhood, so I give him credit for that.
Yeah, but he needs to be, he's making decisions that affect all the stakeholders in this group.
Kathy, you had some questions?
Yeah, I had a quick question. I just want to clarify. Are you going to put up a map on your website showing this 1,000-foot buffer so residents who might have questions about whether or not they might qualify to have it well tested?
I wasn't gonna put up that map. We can consider it. I was mostly just going to contact them once we had a confirmation. So we've submitted our request to have all those wells tested to the Drinking Water Municipal Assistance Division. They haven't denied it, but they have to get the funding in place. And then once I get the official confirmation that we can sample those, then I send letters to those homeowners letting them know that we want to sample their wells. And if they don't want us to sample them, that they can contact us and opt out of that sampling.
Maybe Gelman could pay to have that done.
You mean I think you mean as a tool for when, like you suggested,
Yeah.
people come and ask us,
We do have a
we can
map
point to an outline
indicating
and say, you're not
which
even close.
properties
Yeah,
are
that's
being
what I meant.
tested.
We don't.
Oh, we don't?
We don't. Not available to the public at this
Okay.
point.
It's
Well,
really
they're
easy for us
shaded
if we say,
and-
you're
they're
not even
shaded.
close,
Yeah.
don't worry about it, you know?
So
Yeah.
the map
Yeah.
wasn't quite
That would be
the
helpful.
newest
Yeah.
map that is
Yeah.
on the card webpage has the properties shaded in lavender that are sampled or have
Those are the ones that are
previously been
in that
sampled.
testing,
Yep.
including the 1,000-foot one?
Yes.
Okay, that's what
Right.
I've been using, but.
Yeah,
There's a lot of questions at public meetings on that.
yeah, so it's on our website, it's just Roger didn't have it pulled up, it's
Yeah.
a separate link. The one he had was a stagnant fact sheet, so from 2017, I think, when we did that fact sheet.
Yeah, that one's a little outdated. So we'll make sure we update
Yeah, so if you scroll up,
the main map to include Breezewood detection, because that one is not on there.
So where's the?
On the left, on the blue, on the left menu, scroll back up. It'll sit right there.
Oh, there,
Yeah.
okay.
It came up at that meeting with Tetra Tech, and, you know, that one lady was wondering.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a real challenge.
Speed up
because
your-
people hear, oh my God, I have a well.
Right.
And
They might live 5 miles away.
a lot of them are, you know, they think they're proximate because they know that intersection or whatever. And
Yeah.
Takes a while here sometimes.
Our internet's slow, especially in the basement. So
I need to talk to.
but that map is the most up to date, and we'll make sure we,
don't worry about it, we'll be able to have
by
it
the
in
beginning of
meetings
next year, update it again. So we'll be the most up to date.
Just all the secure area, our dispatch is getting out here.
What dispatch? What is good?
They're moving the
Dispatch?
coordinated dispatch down here. Lucky folks.
Okay, well, that's not loading, but I'll.
Is there anybody from the county who couldn't talk to Andy and speed up the internet now?
I think some of that will, hi, I'm Jason from the county. I think that will happen with the dispatch center coming in.
Yeah, well, and we won't be down here anyway.
We won't
so,
be down?
Yeah, it'll all be locked off, bricked up and secure. But we will have meeting space upstairs.
Yep.
It's much better up there.
Won't be the dungeon.
Yeah.
All right, any other discussion items for DEQ?
Eagle.
Excuse me.
Cost you $1.
Have it. All right, so we'll move forward with the Gelman, Pall, NPDES permit renewal. I'm not sure who put that item on the agenda.
Well, because it's time. Permit expired in October, and it's November.
So I'll speak to that.
Okay.
So,
We knew they were gonna be here because it's a quarterly meeting.
so I'm Chris Alexander. I run permit section for the state. We issue all surface water and groundwater, wastewater discharge permits. So Tarek is out of the office. Lucky him, he's in Bermuda. So I'm here in his place, but I do want to speak to actually a couple of things. Bigger picture, you all probably know this already, but in case you don't, this permit, you mentioned it expired in October and it's November. So the section has an NPDES permit backlog that we've been working on for a good long time. So we have a lot of permits that are on backlog that are in our queue to address. So we're working on, a lot of hundreds of other permits. So not to tell you that this permit's not important. I just want you to know that we're behind on a lot of permits. And so the fact that it's expired by a month, it means they're still under permit. They still have to comply. All of the obligations still apply to Pall, as always, okay? So rest assured that just because that date's passed doesn't relieve them of meeting any of their obligations. So I just want to be sure that we're clear on that. The second thing I want to touch on, and perhaps Tarek said this in the past, so I apologize if this is repetitive, but it may be worth repeating. Our sister division, RRD, and the Water Resources Division, we have different roles in water pollution, in addressing water pollution. We run a wastewater discharge permitting program. So the Federal Clean Water Act is, Michigan issues wastewater discharge permits under federal and state law. So there are requirements that we must meet as an agency at this site and many, many other sites. So some of the issues being brought up here for this particular cleanup, we have groundwater cleanup sites around the state. So we have water quality-based effluent limits that we have to address, and we have treatment technology-based effluent limitations that must be addressed under the Federal Clean Water Act. So what you see here, there's some question about the protection of people's drinking water wells based on surface water, a wastewater discharge permit. And I want to be real clear about our obligations under the law, both federal and state. We have to write a permit that's protective of surface waters of the state. And so you know that this permit for years has had a treatment technology-based limitation of 7 micrograms per liter. That's what the treatment is capable of achieving. The federal law requires us to apply the most restrictive of those numbers, and that's why 7's been in this permit. So we have, through the course of our interaction with this stakeholder group, we have had requests to obtain a lot of additional data from Pall, Gelman. I think you call them Gelman here, is that right?
Yeah.
We permit them as Pall, so I apologize. I'll flip back and forth between the two. So you want to know where we are on the permit. We're actually in the throes of reviewing a lot of the data, the extra submittals that we've received based on some concerns. We're looking at their influent data, we're looking at their effluent data. So again, I'm going to go back to the different roles that RRD plays and water resources play. We have different endpoints. Now, all surface waters of the state are protected at the point the point of intake for drinking water. So think of the Great Lakes, think of the Huron River for the city's surface water intake. So we're evaluating the concerns here at this site. We are going through the data that we requested from the permittee based on the concerns that you've all shared. So we're getting through that data right now. And that helps us make an informed decision on the reissued permit. But I want to assure you that we're looking at all the data. We're evaluating it, and we will share a draft permit with you. But I also want to call to your attention that we've, for years, looked at the gaining and losing of the stream. We've heard that concern. We don't dispute that this is a losing stream. We don't dispute that we have the same concerns that you do here. Our first goal is to protect public health. But I also want to let you know what we have to do under federal law and under state law in this particular permit. So we have to draft a cleanup permit that is protective of water quality standards of the surface waters. Okay. So I am very mindful. I'm a fellow moderator, a strict time person, so I'm going to check in on time. And I want to make sure you can ask questions.
Any questions?
Well, what's the position for this hit on Breezewood that's within 400 feet of the creek?
I'm not able to comment on that. I'm not aware of the hit. Is that a hit?
But that should be part of the data that you're getting.
The data for, is this a residential well?
Yes.
So we don't evaluate residential well data when we're setting wastewater discharge permit limits.
But even if it came from surface water?
I'm not sure that it did come from surface water.
That's right, we don't know.
Correct. So again, going
So when
back
you
to
don't
what the
know,
law
do you-
requires, we have to set a permit that's consistent with the Clean Water Act and state law.
Yeah.
So we're looking at what's coming out of the pipe.
The pipe at the discharge.
That's correct.
Yeah. By the way, what do you call Brody's title? Sorry, Jim Brody, who's been working on the Gelman site since he got out
Consultant
of
for
college.
Gelman.
Yeah, anyway, he went on to get a master's, and through Larry Lemke, I was able to get this depiction of the plume in 2002 that Brody did, and showing that this is a losing part of the tributary, and this is the result is all this dioxin is going out to the west. And yet, this didn't show that it was anywhere near Breezewood. So this kind of supports the idea that the hit at Breezewood came from discharge from the creek.
I have
I know you don't.
no ground to disagree with you there. What I'm telling you is our division's role in this is to
I know
regulate
that the
discharge.
divisions do, but water doesn't respect your divisions.
I understand that, but what I am telling you is that we will have to look to our counterparts under Part 201 to address the plume. When we get involved, it's when anyone.
Do you look at
comes
the
and
history
agrees.
of the
Yes.
decisions?
Yes.
So
But
you
what I'm saying-
understand that we had a agreement with the company in 1995, 96 to discharge no more than 3 parts per billion. You know that history, right?
I can't say I know that history.
Okay, go back and look at it, because there was a signed agreement with the township for that kind of discharge. And then the company reneged on it. Then there was a contested case following that where we got the administrative law judge ruled that it was going to be, okay, 5 parts per billion discharge. And because the DQ had been pulled out of the DNR by then in the New England administration, there was no more Natural Resources Commission to rubber stamp that decision by the administrative law judge from that contested case. So instead of going to the Natural Resources Commission, it went to the head of the DEQ, Russ Hardy, who, without any analysis or reason, doubled or tripled that discharge limit. And that's what was in place in the permit. Then the company said, well, that was too tight. So in the last week of a 90-day comment period, they contested. And that's what led to the contested case, and SRSW joined and got the 5 parts per billion through the administrative law judge.
So does anyone have other questions for water, the water
I'm not done
resources
yet.
group?
So you need to know that history, because we already had 3 as a limit, 5 parts per billion as a limit, when the cleanup standard for the groundwater was 77 and 85 parts per billion. Now that the cleanup standard is tightened to 7.2, even though it's not your division, it's just natural that that discharge limit should be tightened as well.
You understand the discharge limit is and has been 7 for years, right?
Yeah, but not at this site.
We are regulating this cleanup site. So I'm not able to address the movement of the plume. That's what our partners and our RD do.
And this is part of the problem we've had with this site, is that, you know, different divisions aren't working toward the same.
We actually are. What I'm trying to explain to you is the Water Resources Division regulates a cleanup. So once they start extracting, bringing any contamination, whether it's the Velticol cleanup in St. Louis, in DDT, or it's 1,4-dioxane here, we get involved. We don't dictate how they clean up the site. Our role is regulating once they extract the water. Once they pull it up, they must treat it to protect surface waters of the state. That's our role. As much as I might want to expand my role, I'm not able to.
I understand.
That's what we look to Part 201.
And I just hope that you can at least get close to what we all expect in terms of discharge limits to make it more safe. So we don't have any more homeowners' wells contaminated.
Again, I want to let you know again, we understand your concerns. We really do. We're trying to do a very, very thorough job of looking at all of the data, and we want to be as transparent as possible with you so that you understand how we develop the permit and where the limits come from. So
When you make your decision, will that data that you're using be made public?
absolutely. My Waters database, I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, you may not be. All of our information on all of our discharges are all public facing. So
Okay.
you can see all of the data that we see. Once a document is put out for public notice, you'll see everything that we looked at. And then if not, you just let us know and we'll get you all the data for sure.
Appreciate that, thank you.
Yeah, Roger, I actually downloaded the data that she was talking about, all the additional organics. It's like 400 some pages long.
It was a read. It was a read that they gave us. Yes.
All right, Rita.
Thank you. I just would like you to review the process for us, because you said that you're going to draft the permit and share that with CART. So I wonder if you have any kind of an estimate, timeline, and sequence of how things are expected to go.
So the first thing, right now, we're developing the permit. So again, we start with data we need to look in order to develop those limits. The first entity that's going to see this draft permit is the permittee.
Okay.
So they're the first ones to take a look at it. And sometimes, I'm going to tell you with our experience with permittees, sometimes they don't like what we've drafted. And so we need to get through that. And sometimes those are meetings, yeah, believe it or not. So we'll share that with them. And then once we have an agreed, not always agreed, sometimes we'll move to public notice without agreement. At that time, there will be at least a 30-day public comment period. I understand this group has already asked for a public meeting and hearing, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, so we'll schedule that up right away with a public notice. And perhaps Jessica can work with someone here to find an appropriate venue for that meeting. That will be the time you all get a chance to review everything and provide your comments to us.
That's helpful, thank you.
You're welcome.
So if I could just make a quick comment. I just remind people that Gelman initially cleaned up to non-detect. So their effluent was non-detect for a long time. And then they petitioned the DEQ to save some money and allow them to use a different system. And so they of their discharge to a higher number than non-detect. I'm not sure what they went to, but the concern we have is that we're getting water coming in from the creeks, we're getting water from Gelman, and it's potentially getting into Barton Pond, which has detected 1,4-dioxane and low values. That's a concern because that's our drinking water source. We want to make sure that that is not contaminated in the short term. So they were able to get it to non-detect at one time. It's just they wanted to save money, so they changed their treatment system.
Theoretically, could the Water Resources Division determine that the current treatment technique is not protective of surface water and they would have to review implementing a different type of treatment that could get to a lower effluent?
We are unable to dictate industrial treatment. We can.
Just numbers.
We can dictate municipal treatment. The regulations allow that. The regulations don't allow us to tell someone what treatment to use. What we do is set limitations that are protective, and the facility will determine the type of treatment. Now, there may be, for example, a steel mill. There's something called effluent limit guidelines that establish kind of a level playing field of numbers that all across the industry you must meet. But in this instance, we did see those comments, and we are looking into the history. If you can imagine, we have four paper boxes full of the history, and we've been wading through that. This is actually our second, mine personally, and I know Jessica wrote the last permit for this particular facility. So we're not new. I've been in the section for over 10 years, but this is, as far as the history and those 4 reams or 4 box loads of paper, we are still trying to wade through. So I apologize if we don't know all the history quite like you all do.
If you need any help pinpointing issues, like you have a question about what's in some of those boxes, feel free to contact me, because I've done this with other.
I recall your name in a lot of the documents.
So one fact that you may not know, I keep saying Pall and Gelman, is that Danaher owns, it was Gelman, Pall bought Gelman, Danaher bought Pall, split it apart, put the cleanup back on the Gelman entity. But Danaher owns another subsidiary that has UV oxidation that can treat to non-detect.
Trojan.
Yeah. That's actually that's a system being used in Tucson because they caught their dioxin too late, so they have to treat it at the water they're into.
All right,
But-
Patty, do you want to come and start setting up here?
But keep in mind that the company, and this is something we can do as CARD, is to shame the company for not using their own systems at this site.
But we'll certainly look into that.
We just bonded $3.5 million last night to buy a Trojan system to meet the state's cryptosporidium requirements. Yeah. I was hoping we could get a discount, but.
Well,
I'm going to argue that's a good requirement to meet.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think Brian could answer this, but I think it's going to be infrequently used. Isn't that correct? Like only when it peaks to a certain limit, we have to get that last zero off the end of it, or?
Right, it will not be used continuously.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can just put it up over top. Although I do have those images.
It's part of the, it's only part of that advanced oxidation process. So you have to do it, you have to do it download dioxide.
I'll put it here and then we'll see.
Doesn't matter that much.
Probably not.
Apparently it's not size big enough to actually do that. And so if we have to do equipment, what can we do? Get another one. I wasn't thrilled with that.
Yes. So Patty works for Untitled Chapter. She is the consultant for the city, and she's going to present on the model that they created for proposing new monitoring well placement.
You said you recorded this?
Yep.
It is online if you want to watch the video.
Best sent out the
Hopefully
link.
everybody did.
Okay, so we had some technical difficulties this morning. We don't have the right technology here for me to do the PowerPoint that I had, so I'm using a PDF. So Roger's gonna have to slide through it, which means I can't show you the animation. But I don't intend to give you the exact thing that I did if you made it to the listening session last week. So we've got some new slices. So I'm gonna give a really brief overview and skip a bunch of stuff. So I'm gonna hit the next. So as Jenny alluded to, Brian asked me to take a look at this northern area of the plume, and our whole interest is making sure we're protecting the city's drinking water supply. Keep going. I've got this down here, but it's probably just as easy to see up here. So we're using entirely existing data. There's no new, no borings were installed, no wells were installed, nothing like that. And this outline here is basically our model space. Roger's messing with me. So basically, all of these little nodes are a well. They're included in the model, as well as everything within that space is inside the model. We loaded it with, actually, I think you can go to the next slide. Go to the next slide. Here we go. Can you make it? Okay. We'll deal with this. All right. So this is what we put. We did a bunch of data collection. That was sort of our first go around with this, and we figured out what that model space was going to be. That's down here. We pulled all of the monitoring wells that Gelman had available. Put the geology in, we put in elevation data. We've got some other things in there. The 1,4-dioxane concentration data, we used the most recent for each monitoring well that we have data for. And it required a lot of people's help with this. I got help from Jenny, she gave me the GIS layer. I got some boring logs from Dan, and Roger gave me a ton of information, some bore logs and data. So the elevation data, we did a pretty deep dive into that, making sure that everything was correct. There were a few inconsistencies, and I shared all of that information with Roger so we can get one good database. Can you hit the next one? So just a little bit about the model itself without getting too deep into it. This is a deterministic model. So this is one set of data goes in. We can cut slices of it. It's not a stochastic model, which you're used to seeing with QtrlyMtg, which has some time travel with it. It's a snapshot in time. And then,
Next.
hang on, you can go back. Well, that's fine, you can go to this. You can go to the next one. So a little bit about some of the restraints for this model. What we have is what we have, right? So the monitoring well network we have is it. So there are some large gaps in the physical space of the monitoring wells. So what happens then is the model has to interpolate in between 2 points, right? And that's the kriging that was the word that was on the last page. So the model tries to weight the information and determine what could be in between. That's for the geology, and that's also for the contaminant point. And then, of course, we don't have any data to the north here. There's very little in the, around the boundary here, and then we don't have anything to interpolate outside of our model space. And I know I did get some comments. People were asking, why didn't we use the residential wells that are up here? And it's because that's a huge gap. Garbage in, garbage out is what we say for these models, right? If we don't have decent points out here to kind of tighten that, it's just guessing. It's just guesswork. Thank you. Okay, you can go to the next one. So I can't play this because it's the PDF, so you can go to the next slide. You can go to the next one. You can go to the next one.
Speak to how you weren't allowed to get data.
The sample, okay. So if you want to go back one slide, I think it was. So we had asked Gelman for access to some of these wells because we wanted to do method 522 with split samples, and these are the wells that we had identified. Unfortunately, they said no, they didn't want to use they didn't want the resolution. We wanted the resolution, right, that would help with the model, but we did not have access to it.
Because you're going to use
Can the
method
Attorney General's
522.
office compel that for us?
Theoretically.
I'd love that. I think we should be getting a look. I wonder why they don't want us to look at that. I mean, I think they're afraid we're gonna run off and do 522 for dioxin and then VOC and everything else on that, whole battery tests on that. And they don't want us to know what's in there.
Yeah,
I'm just cynical about
piece-
it, you know.
Yeah, well, the piece of it is too, is the fact that, you know, the intervention, they're not very cooperative about right now.
Well, how could we expedite that? Pass a resolution?
I don't think so.
All right. Let me just
All
give
right.
some information to that. The
Thank you.
method 522, if you don't know, has a better resolution, so it detects down to 0.07 parts per billion, where the current method used by Gelman is 1 part per billion. So this is into the well location recommendation, but before that, let's go to the slices, if you want to put them up.
Well, these,
Yeah. I can use these if you want, but
yeah,
if you
just
want
go
to
use
do. Okay.
this. The details on that aren't going to be that much different.
All right, so this is a little harder to see, and I apologize because we don't have it up here. In case you need this too. You're fine. So all of these, this is the model space here, so you can put it down if you want. So unfortunately, these are in black and white, makes it a little harder to see. So A to A prime is down here. That's this one. So we're looking basically from monitoring well 94, which is near Wagner, kind of near the source. And then headed up to, this is 465 DuPont. So we've got the plume on here, and then the lithology's behind it. There's the lithology. These are just cross-sectional views from that model, right? So we took, the ones that I showed last week were basically 3 slices from south to north, headed up to this. We start to lose things up here though because, you know, we don't have a lot of well network. But essentially what we showed last week was that we're increasing the clay to the north. And in this one, I wanted to show 3 different slices, so because I know people have asked me about DuPont. How did it get there? So we did this slice through here, and then we did a slice kind of along the axis of the plume that heads to the east, that Beth is modeling for us nicely. And then there's another one that we did, a cross-section that runs through here, that runs across that north to southeast, northwest to southeast. So let me go through these real quick. So here's the geology. Geology's behind the plume on this one. We get an idea. So again, this is near Wagner over here. We start to see some of these yellow layers are the more granular sand and gravel layers.
Just so everybody knows, the right-hand side is the geology. The left-hand side is the geology overlaid with the parts per billion of dioxin. So it's really the base layers of this side and then the dioxin plume on the left.
So we've got, then the brown colors are the clay and the silts. So, you know, you get some weird things with the model like this where the sand kind of curls back around. That's just, you know, not having enough data. That's probably not what happens, right? So then here's the plume. The red obviously is the highest. And in the model space here where I think our highest detection was 2100. And this is highlighting basically DuPont, 465 DuPont. And then here's some of the mass coming from Wagner. So in the geology, you kind of see the sand layer here, right? Here's 465 through here that it kind of goes it goes lateral and maybe down a little bit. That's what the model indicates. The next slice, B to B prime, this is essentially from DuPont to Vets Park. So up here, here's our 465 again, so here's our mass. And you can see, you know, groundwater flow generally after we get up here heads to the east. So you see that here, right? We've got this
So
large mass.
That is a high concentration?
Yeah, red is the high concentration, so you see the mass headed to the east.
What does that red represent? How high?
2100.
2100?
Yeah. It's about 1,000 to 2,100. Yeah. And again, you see that there's a similar amount of, sand versus clay layers. And that the plume is kind of riding along those sand units on top of the clay. And then the final slice that we did for today is the C to C prime, which is Wagner to Maple. So this kind of goes across, more of a west to east. And you see a lot more sand here, which is, what we know is that there's kind of a wall of clay over here. And more sand that runs, sort of in the southern part of our model space. And there again is the high concentrations headed off to the east. They're starting to pinch a little bit in the model space as it gets into this smaller sand unit headed to the east. I should say these blues and greens, the non-detects end up showing up as the blues. So it just sort of encapsulates the plume. I think if anybody doesn't have questions, I'll go to the well recommendations so that Beth can rest her arm.
Is this one?
Yeah, that'll be good. Can you go to the slide that has the total?
Up or down?
I think it's the next one. There we go. Just in the interest of time, I wanted to kind of go through this pretty quick. So we considered quite a few things for locating the well locations, and each of these sort of orange circles represents an area that we're suggesting a well could potentially go. And here's your prohibition zone in the red. What's outlined in brown are the 950 foot contours, which represent sort of the high in the area. And in the absence of having data past the prohibition zone, we looked at surface topography because groundwater tends to follow surface topography. And we were kind of looking for what we would call channels for where groundwater might flow. And so we sort of targeted first this Miller Maple area for putting a monitoring well. And then, and obviously we would take a look at those sand units that we have in the model and in the bore logs to kind of understand where things might be moving, to figure out where a location would go, but also looking at city property, right of way, city parks, that kind of thing.
So your wells are going to be different, they're going to have different locations, screened on each well.
Yep.
It just won't be one location.
Correct. So we suggested, if you want to go back one or two, rather, maybe. Oh no, it's one. Sorry. There you go. So this is what we came up with: an installation of 3 or 4 nested wells. So those nested wells are exactly that, hitting those different aquifers, assuming that we have different aquifers. North, I have no idea. We want to collect good elevation data. It's always good to have. I always do on my sites go back and get around a survey every year or two because wells tend to settle, so sometimes elevation data changes, which affects your groundwater flow maps. So we would want to tie that in to some existing monitoring wells if possible. Then obviously getting static water levels to tie into existing data for getting good flow maps. We may have a surface water divide in that area, in the Miller Maple area. Obviously, with the lower detection limit is what we would recommend for sampling those monitoring wells. And then completing the aquifer analysis, which is really important to understand how fast is the plume moving, the contaminant moving, does it have a gradient to it, which direction is it flowing? It's really important to understand how that aquifer is, how it works in the geology that's there. That will help understand how quickly, if something, if 1,4-dioxane were in those areas and potentially going to Barton Pond, how quickly would that be happening? And that gives the city time to figure out what infrastructure they need to install. So again, these are just, the first one is, I feel pretty strongly about. And then after that, we would sort of adapt based on our findings for the first one, is what I suggest. Maybe maybe this tells us something completely different than what I've decided. But that's sort of our first cut.
Good.
Okay? Questions?
For the, since you're looking at surface water flow, the tributary there, you kind of point to where the tributary is that goes to Barton Pond?
Right here?
Yeah. Yeah, and the reason you chose that is because that's the one that's going to Barton Pond, because your charge is to deal with city issues. There's another pathway, because there's another tributary over there, and then there's a second one up there that the township needs to worry about, because that's where their township wells. And it could be that the dioxane at DuPont is going to go in one of those paths. And this project doesn't address that. That's going to have to be beyond the scope of this project, so everybody knows that.
Dan?
Maybe I missed it, I had to send an email with a question, sorry.
Dan.
Your nested locations, decisions related to what Vince asked about elevations, is it going to be related strictly to the geology, the water bearing zones you encounter? Are you doing any profiling?
Oh, for sure profiling, yeah, I would totally
Okay,
recommend.
I wasn't quite sure whether as you go down, get some water samples too, what
Yeah,
you mean.
vertical aquifer sampling is what he's referring to, so wherever we encounter water, we would take a sample during the drilling. There's a method to doing that.
Patty, has the city and Tetra Tech done any other work historically looking at groundwater flow directions and in that area?
Yes, third-party reviews of some of the modeling that Gelman has done. And I think back in the 90s, actually, we did a model for this in late 90s.
I recall back in about 2004 timeframe, there was a lot of conversation about groundwater flow in that general area. And there's what I thought
The model space area, sorry.
It's the area that's right around 20, where 14 comes around.
Okay.
And
Here?
Even the county folks were arguing, and others were arguing that groundwater was flowing to the north. And so there was a good deal of focus back in that time frame to evaluate that. And what were the conclusions of Tetra Tech at that time?
2004?
2004 and 5.
Yeah, I couldn't answer that. I don't know, it was before my time at Tetra Tech.
Some reports.
What's that?
There's some reports.
You reported in a letter that we received that attached an email.
Are you sure it wasn't 2014?
That was
when we did the
it was
third-party
earlier
review?
than that. I mean, it's a progression.
Sure.
Probably 2009, 2000.
Yep, there was third-party review in 2009 and then 2014. 2014, I think maybe what you're referring to, because there was some modeling done talking about how by Gelman, that most of the plume was headed to the east. And that we did that, Doug Sutton came in for that.
And the conclusions by Tetra Tech were, in that report, similar to Gelman?
Yes, most of the mass is moving to the east, yeah.
And you didn't see a need at that time to identify these concerns? I don't think anything's changed, right?
What concerns? There's no, we're literally just looking for those sand units that could potentially be headed to the north. So we're not looking for that large mass. We're not suggesting there's a large mass. We're just looking for what could potentially be there in order to protect the city's water supply. Shallow channels.
So we moved the prohibition zone north already once.
Yes.
Yeah, it was modified twice, but.
That's what you can see, it's up for the two red lines up on the north.
All right, any other questions? Rita?
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. What's the concentration of Events Park now?
Is that one of 540? Jared, do you remember? 430, okay.
430, 450
Yeah.
parts per billion. So I guess I didn't get to go to the city meeting. I actually was sick. So these wells are being positioned north in terms of, I can understand that for protection of Barton Pond, the city water supply, drinking water supply, I support that. But there's just this concern that there's this major mass movement to the east, to the more shallow, to the surface, actually. If it stays at the current elevation, it'll be at the surface before it hits the Huron River in the city of Ann Arbor. And I just wonder what's the thinking in Ann Arbor for not caring about monitoring for that.
So that, unfortunately, that's not in my scope, and I can't speak for the city on that.
So you were given a scope
Yeah.
just for protecting the drinking water supply?
Just for investigating this area
Okay.
and figuring out if we wanted to install these monitoring wells, where we would put them. That was the scope.
For protection of the drinking water supply?
Yes.
Okay.
It's meant to be an early warning system, right? It's gonna take time. Tomorrow, they can't be able to treat one for dioxin.
Right.
They're gonna need 5 or 10 years. So that's
No,
the purpose.
I understand that.
Yeah, no, I just wanna be
Yeah.
clear about it, that is the entire goal of this model.
Okay.
Yeah.
That helps.
And
Thank you.
if it is found, would there be some pump and treat, or would then the city, I know.
That's a
like-
question for the city. That's,
Right.
yeah.
Well, if there aren't any more questions for Patty, we can move into Brian's update.
Well, I do have one,
Okay.
point out one thing. On this, because they didn't have enough data to the north, their model chokes off the level at DuPont. And a couple of the Gelman maps do that same thing. But then there are third-party analysis that show that this seam here is actually wider and more extensive. So don't be fooled by what the model says, because the
Yeah.
model is lacking data.
I pointed this out. This is weird. This doesn't make sense. I mean, the sand may end here, the sand may connect here, the sand may continue. We just don't have data. We're at the end of the model space. We don't have wells on the other side.
Roger makes a good point. How did you validate your geology model?
What do you mean, how do we validate it?
Well,
We used all of the existing data.
cross-sections that go through here, so you create a model with math, and you take cross-sections that have been interpreted and agreed by everybody, and you slice right through and you compare the two side by side and see if they're the same.
Compared to what? The responsible party? Is that what you're saying?
No, you're creating a model, and I'm trying to understand how you're relying on your model to project out into space, and there's a space where there is no data. And,
Right.
but in order to do that, your model has to be validated, because it's an algorithm that was creating, it was taking spots from
Yeah.
different places, and it creates, and interprets in between.
Yeah.
So now how do you take the model cross-sections, which was created by the model, whether compared to the cross-sections that were created by geologists that were reviewing the data?
So there's many things within the model itself to help us validate it, that I'm not gonna go into. There's also us going back to the bore logs and understanding that this isn't, we're using all of the existing data. This is a visual interpretation, right? This isn't like the end all. Somebody has to interpret this. And that's what, we're literally just giving you slices to take a look at today. That's not the end of the story. We looked at more of it.
I think those bore logs and the cross-sections were critical to creating that, right?
Yeah. And we reinterpreted the bore logs, so it was our interpretation of, taking a look at what we lumped together as cohesive or granular material. Yeah.
Since you're here, I wanted to ask, there's a debate about contamination down low in the aquifer versus what's happening near the surface or close to the surface. My cousin happens to be a geologist in the East Coast and does this kind of work for small communities. He talks about crosstalk between aquifers, and that's pretty common, and it tends to seek its own level, tries to even out.
Everything's driven by the pressure, right?
So is that something that you think would happen in this aquifer? I know the E aquifer, quote unquote, was not supposed to get contaminated, but now we know it's contaminated. It's probably one part of the whole aquifer.
Yeah.
So you would concur that there is probably crosstalk between these different levels?
Sure. I mean, it's a very complex geology. I think we can all agree on that, and this contamination moves along the path of least
So
resistance.
just because it's down low doesn't mean it won't work its way to the near surface?
Yeah, I mean, I can't answer that all I can tell you is it's gonna follow whatever path it wants to follow, and there are many factors that push
This
it
is
along.
Paul's own map showing, how
Mhm.
the aquifer
Sure.
is layered. And as it
Yeah.
falls away, it's a very steep watershed, it falls away, it cuts away at those layers.
Mm-hmm.
And so it exposes them. And so it's one of the reasons West Park has got seeps coming out of the hillside.
All right, any other questions for Patty before we
Well,
move
I
on?
just want to point out, I brought up the image from Fram's 2011, I think it was, study. He's one of Lucky's students, and this is the area that beyond us was choked off. Well, this is clearly not being choked off in the deeper area. This is the elevation that DuPont, so there could be a flow this direction. So anybody that's concerned about the township wells, this is where we need more monitoring and more analysis, so they expand the data. When you look at the full scope of things, you can't just look at one interpretation, you have to look at them all.
All right, I'm gonna ask Brian if you have updates from the city?
I don't have any other updates than what Patty's already shared.
Okay.
so continue
All right,
15
cool.
minutes.
Chug them up. Roger, you're up.
All right, I just want to reiterate that we have a lot of information that needs to be indexed. And we have at least one student group that's trying to help catalog all the information that the different stakeholders have. I gave them a list of people that they can try to interview, and they're having trouble getting those interviews done in the time frame of their semester. So that's unfortunate that here's free help to try to catalog the information that all entities have, and they're not getting a lot of quick cooperation. So this project will, it's intended to be a long-term project so that one semester can build upon the prior semester. Because apparently we don't have the public funds to do a proper categorization of this data. Like, you have boxes of data, and it's up to you guys to go through that with no indexing into it. There's no keyword searches or anything like that, right? I mean, this is just boxes of paper. And that's what I've had to do with all these years, and that's why I use Google Earth as a platform to bring a lot of that together. But even that needs some better structure, as you can see how long it takes me to get to a certain layer. I did put in things like, if you click on one of these wells, you now get a link to the well log. And so you can, from Google Earth, you can go right to the well logs. And I did that also for the cross sections that we have. And you know, it's a pain to keep these cross sections up to date because we're not getting electronic copies of the cross sections. We're getting image copies that I have to then trace by hand. But if you, let me go to the cross sections. I turn on all these cross sections with links. Here's a lot of the cross sections we have. Now there's some gaps, like maybe around 465 DuPont. There's only a few cross sections that go through there. But if you click on one, again, you can go and look at the cross section right from Google Earth. And you can see that, well, there's maybe some data missing because this was back in 2000. So you might go look at another one, maybe one of these here that goes off to the west. And click on one of those. So it's quick reference. So this is I clicked on a well log instead of the cross section. If you click on one of these cross sections, first of all, it'll tell you where it is in the left panel, but then it'll also give you this link that you can bring up the cross-section without having to fumble through papers. Now this is an instance where the company has said, well, this is pitched off. and they make decisions based on that. But in fact, this is not pinched off. This goes to the west, northwest. And anybody that's relying on just this kind of diagram without looking at the full set is ignoring some key data. So this topic we have here is information infrastructure, what we know and what we don't know. There's a lot of data that we think we know, but then it's not easily accessible. It's not, it takes a while to go through those boxes or go through Dan's folder, right, Dan? I mean, if you want to find something, it's all up here. Where is that? Did I put it in the second folder or the first folder?
Absolutely.
And the more we can get that available for all the decision makers, so they don't have to spend a lot of consultant time at consultant rates to do what staff maybe could do, will save everybody a lot of money and end up in a better response. And I maintain that if you get the EPA in, they will do that and make that available to the public in more easily usable format than what we have now. And if we don't have that, bad things can happen. The next item is preparation for the December 12th joint session for the EPA action. Has anybody got any updates on where and when and any new news about that for anybody here?
Is Jason still here?
No.
We don't know when it is?
We have council members.
I believe it'll be on December 12th.
And do you know where yet?
We left it to the county to try and book that space.
Is there somebody from the county here?
He was here, but he's gone.
Duck out.
Well, it's really important that we know that soon so we can rally all the interested parties. Because there's public comment period during that.
So, is it specifically a session for EPA action?
No.
That's what I thought. Okay,
So it's my
fine.
understanding that this is a follow-up to the June 6th meeting.
And the September 12th.
And then the September 12th meeting, that's right. And this is the follow-up that I believe that was noted as the interveners and lawsuit update.
Yeah, so
Not necessarily
it's an
EPA
opportunity for,
action.
it's an opportunity for the interveners to meet all at once,
Mislabeled
which
here.
has not been happening really up until this series of meetings. And so when we have a closed session, it's a wide-ranging conversations happening there.
So I realize that you do want considerable public comment time, but I'll tell you that the real work is going to happen in a closed session. The reason for this meeting was we gave direction to our attorneys at the last meeting in closed session. And they will report back to us at this meeting in closed session. And you really want us to have as much time in that closed session to hammer it out among the three different entities as possible for us to make any real movement. And I don't mean to diminish the role of the public in this, but it's getting time for us as interveners to make some decisions, and the more candid conversation we can have among ourselves in closed session and try to find a mutually agreeable path, the better it is for both the entities and the public. I can't say much more than that, but I hope that you understand what I'm trying to say.
I think one of the main issues all along has been whether to petition EPA for a Superfund. I think that is on the minds of a lot of people. I don't want that to be discredited or not considered an important issue that will be discussed, I'm sure, and it's been an ongoing issue for this group to discuss.
well, we keep approaching that fork in the road, but as we approach it, it seems to be moved 90 days down the road further.
Yes.
But what you're saying is that you're looking for that decision. And what I'm saying is that that decision will be made. We are putting it off, but we're not abandoning the fact that it is a binary choice, one or the other.
What is it? But it's not a binary
Yeah.
choice, that's the whole point.
Right.
Well, yeah.
Do you think you'll ever get 100% of all of the parties to agree either? That just seems like a lot for politicians to all agree.
Oh, I hate to speculate on how any of my colleagues might be predisposed, but the simple answer is no.
It'll help if we bring Halloween candy.
But, each of the governmental entities that are intervening parties, we necessarily speak as a body. And so if there's 11 of us and 6 of us want to do one thing and 5 don't, well, the 5 get to go along with the 6.
Well, that's what I'm
Of course,
hoping.
and so that's just the way that's gonna go down. And so, we'll see what that conversation is. And there's a lot to be discussing there, not only this opportunity for EPA intervention, but everything that's in the books that we're having to review also, which is a strange dynamic, of course, and
Everything that's in the what?
well, in our consent judgment
Yes.
writings and
So
conversations.
the whole consent judgment is part of this shtick that's going on?
Well, it's my hope that my colleagues have read it and noted it. I mean, I got a lot of notes, and I've been trying to work with our legal staff to, make sure that the things that are important to us are included. So.
Thank you.
So as we hear, or when we hear more about exactly the time and location and confirm the date on that meeting, we'll get that out to the card group as soon as
Yes.
we know.
So I guess I find myself wondering, so, it was initially put on the agenda as, for EPA action, and I think that there is a question. I guess that I would say there's a question of whether CARD could have an opinion that is communicated to these entities, or some of the entities, or all of the entities. And one of those concerns that CARD's discussed a lot is bringing in EPA. You're now saying that the whole consent judgment might be reviewed and open to negotiation, which brings in all kinds of things because of the plans and the cleanup and monitoring plan and protection plans and,
Well, it was open before I got elected, and so it's open.
It's very concerning. And then I think the other thing that has been pretty loudly and universally commented on is the way that so much of this happens out of the public eye, and the delay, the timetable has been going on a long time. And so I guess what I'm wondering is, can CARD or should CARD consider having some kind of a resolution that is passed to government officials? It can be narrow in scope or big in scope, but that expresses an opinion on some of this. And we know that we don't make the decision, but it could be put forward as this is an opinion. It's a petition.
I would say that because the interveners are actually members of CARD, that might not be appropriate for you to tell other members of this committee what to do. I think everybody around the table as an individual can talk to their own elected official and tell them what's important to them. You have to remember that early on, some of us were strong proponents of bringing the EPA in. And the path that we decided to take is to bring all the interveners together to try to come to a mutual conclusion on appropriate action. And so that's where we are now, is to see if we can all agree on which direction we should go. And that's more difficult than it sounds.
Because I would just say one thing, I wasn't proposing we would tell anybody what to do. We would simply express our wish, our position and our wishes.
I think,
This is what we support.
I think it'd be good to review Dan Bicknell's pluses and minuses of going to the EPA. And I would hope that the interveners, when they're talking, are using that as a guideline. If this is an EPA site, this is what would happen. If we have to negotiate, then one of those items on the EPA would not be fulfilled, and make your decision based on that. There's a lot of people concerned about the current state of the EPA. Last week, I was visiting DC, and I met with a former high school classmate who, in the early days, he and another guy ran the EPA, and he just recently retired. And I broached this situation with him. He said, no question, the EPA has the wherewithal to take care of a site like this. Other options take longer, they don't do as well, and lets the polluter off the hook. So that's straight from somebody, even though with downsizing in certain parts of the EPA, he still said, for this Superfund, whether they're a responsible party, they can afford to pay for it. You're going to get more public input. You're going to spend less public money at the local level, and you're going to get a better outcome. So that's my position.
All right, well, we're digressing into positions on EPA, so I just want to bring it back. We'll get more information on that.
But this is coming up right after the next card
I
meeting,
just sent an
right?
email
So
to ask if there was any updates, so.
I'm hoping people discuss it before they go into the closed session. I hope they have discussion among your colleagues on the boards to get this done right.
Yeah, and I'm concerned about Jack's iteration of this as a binary choice. I mean, it seemed that early on when we were having these discussions, one of the positions that was being taken largely by the interveners was the fact that, well, you know, if you call in the EPA, it's not going to go away. The state's still going to be working with the EPA if they come in. Now, all of a sudden, it's a binary choice.
No, but let me describe,
maybe I don't understand what you're saying.
Let me describe that binary choice.
Yeah.
We either involve the EPA or we don't involve the EPA.
Yeah, that's certainly true. Right.
And that's all for binary, right?
But yes, but
okay. So
okay.
That's what I tried to describe, and I'm sorry if I confused you.
Maybe I misunderstood because it seemed like
it's a yes or no question, and you know, some of us have strong opinions.
Oh yeah, well, everybody has strong opinions on it. The question was, it seemed to me that you were saying that we either go the route of amending the consent judgment or we work with the EPA. That's a binary choice, and that's an incorrect binary choice. So it's helpful if you're thinking otherwise when you say binary choice, and that's a different question. So.
Yeah, to speak to what you were saying, Rita, about all these other moving parts of this, the idea that this is being renegotiated with, you know, under your authority, we're kind of a party to that now. Well, we are a party to that now. It's, you know, we're trying. I mean, I can't speak for anybody else. I'm trying to do the best I can with that portion of it, and with the decision should we get the EPA involved, and with these other decisions, and keeping CAR notified and keeping up with what's going on. And so there are a lot of moving parts, and each one of them it kind of is worthy of our full attention. And they all seem to be coming to a conclusion, or not a conclusion, but to a decision point, you know, kind of simultaneously. You know, we're working hard to get this consent judgment to be what we need it to be, and in case we don't have other choices.
So I would just remind people, I think Mike said it quite well at the last meeting, the debate joint meeting, which is a delay is a win for Donald. Mm-hmm. And so I do not want that part of my comment to get lost, because I think it's not just the EPA, I think it's also just this closed door, who knows what the heck's happening, and it just goes on and on and on.
Marcia, did you have a question?
I just wondered if the parties involved have, I mean, you probably discussed, but, and I know there's a lot to consider. Is there any time frame for making a decision? I mean, it seems like this can go on being discussed back in the July meeting, it was like, oh my gosh, we have to wait 3 more months, and now we will wait 6 months, and,
I thought that the last time we met, we were going to make a decision at that time, so I can't give you a better.
Surprised too?
Yeah.
Are you hopeful? No, you can't say.
Well, the lawyers wanted 6 months. You gave it 3.
All right, good.
Yeah,
We want to
I
get
just
back
want to say,
I'm so cynical
Agenda.
and bitter.
many of us are very frustrated.
Yeah.
Just,
Oh, good.
And not just on our own behalf, but on your behalf as well.
and these guys have set up really well. We're kind of stuck right now, so we got to go through the process.
All right, Roger, your Google Earth mashup support tools, you want to do?
Well, I already covered it.
Okay, then do we want to move to Jeff?
Yeah, I just have a question about Google Earth. So I see you have Google Earth Pro running on there on your computer, and so I'm going to ask City IT to give me that so that I can get a copy of your awesome.
It'll open on the regular Google Earth, but Google Earth Pro is now free.
Oh, yeah, so I think IT can load that for me in. And then so do I need to get a local copy of that for me to whip through it like you do, or is that online?
So you can download the Google Earth Pro on your home computer.
No, I mean your content.
Oh, the content? Yeah, it's on SRSW.
And you're viewing that right now from the online?
Well, I've loaded it.
Right, that's what I'm saying. I'd like to get a copy of it.
You download the KNZ and then you open it.
Okay.
Yeah, he has it all available on the SRSW website.
That KNZ's out there?
I have to update some of the recent things, like when I met with Patty last night, I put some layers and I haven't uploaded those yet. I'm doing this pro bono. And I'm trying to give tools to the decision makers, and they're not using them.
Well, that's why I'm going to have IT help me with that, because this is a great tool, and when people ask me about this, I'd rather open up a map and show them what's going on.
Now, I know some people have said, well, their entity doesn't let them use Google Earth. Anybody here have problems opening Google Earth on their work computer? You guys do, right? Now, is it Google Earth Pro or is it just Google Earth?
I have Google Earth.
Yeah, we've got some limitations.
Google Earth Pro gives more resolution and a few other options, but otherwise it's basically the same. And I encourage everybody to do that and just play with it. And you can get insights that you can't get from looking at paper maps like this. By the way, I'm going to send around this in the last few minutes. This is Fram's thesis, which has some of the best cross-sections of the whole site. So if you want to kind of see where the variations are in the cross-sections, remember when I used to do this with big maps? I almost brought that today. But this is a better version because it's bigger. It covers more of the area. And, so just send that around. You can take a glance at it. Know that that kind of information is out there and not being used by any of the decision makers, because it's not part of the Gelman set of data.
All right, Jeff, we have one more agenda item.
Yeah, I'll be super brief. So I asked for a few minutes to talk about public outreach, and I guess I'll just let you know what I've been thinking about. So as Roger commented on, this massive pro bono effort on his part could be assisted by funds. And so I'm reaching out to, our budget cycle's coming up in December. I want to get some money to create some of these tools for us to put a better face on this for the public, so people should be more aware of what's going on and have an accurate understanding of it, and hopefully it will diminish concerns in the community about their relationship with their wells to the plume and things like that, and just to kind of create better tools for us to be, public-facing tools for us. And so I'm not sure where that money's going to come from, but I'm looking into our own budget for it. And then, there's also been some interest in creating a political action committee, a clean water pack, around this, specifically around this issue. And so I've had some folks looking into that for me and getting the paperwork together for that. One of the problems that we have is, it's been in what little news we have lately, it's been in the news that we don't have very good news. And so people don't know what's going on around here. And so, there's a need for sometimes there's a need for clarifying statements on things, like the news covered Tetra Tech's presentation on the wells, the city's presentation on that, but the headline was, City Council says they're gonna float a millage to clean up the Gelman flume. And that was one half of one thing I said in that entire meeting, and that was the headline. And so, and it was completely inaccurate, but what it did lead to was other intervening party members calling me and saying, what the hell is that? You know? And so, you know, all it was the idea that you take a look at this and you think, are we ever going to get any resolution? Are we ever going to get a cleanup? Are we going to have to take the matter into our own hands? You know, either at the water treatment plant or now. And so that's where that came from. And you think, well, how are we going to pay for that, right? And so my hope was that by saying that, it would put the right or the wrong taste in people's mouth, because we shouldn't be paying for this. The polluters should be paying for that. And of course, that part didn't make it to the paper. And anyway, my point being that I think we need to be more forward with our public outreach, and I'm looking into ways to fund that. And if anyone has any suggestions how we could better control our messages and distribute them to the public, I'm happy to take them. And it might be a thing where we create a little subgroup to talk about it, but I just, you know, I really want to hear from folks about that.
So
Yes.
can I interject? So Simone Charles was able to attend our meeting, and she wanted to talk about public engagement, and some of it is because we have that same struggle of how to get our message out there and the right information, and where do people go for information? I mean, you know, we have all these maps, so would you have a couple minutes to maybe anything on here about what we've talked about in the past?
Great.
Okay.
Yeah.
If you want to come up closer to the front, maybe instead of.
Yes, we can hear you.
And introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Simone Charles. I'm with, trying my best not to be on the it's on the.
Trying to avoid the cameras?
Yeah.
With that one, you were. Stand in front of it, you'll be fine.
Everybody can see.
Thank you. I'm not a person for spotlight. I love being in the background, taking notes, having ideas. So yes, when I came to Michigan, University of Michigan a year ago, I met with Kristen and we talked about what were some of the needs of the health department, and she mentioned this project and how do people receive the information that they get.
So what's your title?
I'm sorry, I'm with the School of Public Health, Environmental Health Division.
Okay.
Rita is one of our senior faculty in the department.
Right.
And so my thoughts have been around first getting an understanding of particularly what this group is doing, since you basically are to some extent the face of the issue within the community, but I'm not quite sure if this group encompasses everybody in the community. And so just getting a sense of that, getting a sense of some of the messaging. Is the messaging the right messaging? Where are people getting the messaging? What would they prefer to get? And so I'm attending meetings like you have today, and I thank you for having me, to think through what might be some ways of better presenting the information. Where do we get the information? You talked about several entities having information. How are they all coalesced, and to what benefit that would be? And then what's the best mechanism for reaching the people in the community beyond the group? And even how do they know about you guys? If they want to be a part of you, how do they know about you? So just thinking those things through, working with Kristen to get that done. So I would love to talk with you more about things like how do we fund this? How do we expand this?
So Simone was looking at maybe some grants to try and see if we can funnel some resources, some financial resources, and maybe some staffing. Because I think, we talked a lot about, how does, we have a community that moves in and out of Ann Arbor. Some people may know about it, some people may not. And so just trying to make sure that we're getting a way to reach out to everyone. We've been partnering with the city, doing that Quality Water Matters newsletter, and that's been received really well in the community. That's all things water. We wanted something maybe similar to focus on the dioxin contamination and all of because it's super complicated, and trying to break it down into little chunks for people to be able to to understand, and whether that's, occasional town hall meetings, whether that's newsletters, whether that's websites, maps, some combination thereof.
Yeah, I think that, like, when I started to think about what would somebody who wanted to learn about it need to know, and so, have we created a concise, albeit long, as best we can, history of what's happening here, what has happened in the past, what have been the intervening actions, how do we get to this point, right? And so, the library has a little thing about it that you may have seen, and all these different entities have a little thing about it, but, what's our message? And so, that's part of all that. And where do we put that message, and then how do we tell people about it? And so, whenever anybody new comes to learn about this, they have the message that we want them to hear, and then they have the latest and greatest information also available. And so, website's one thing, but it's a whole PR, and, people design whole businesses around this kind of PR. And so, I don't know. I know county has a little money, city's got a little money. And what city does have is yeah, right. What the city has is a growing PR department. So we got a lot of folks.
I understand the U of M's got a lot of money.
Yeah, that's what I've heard.
So it's great that the U of M is getting involved, and
Yeah.
they haven't been very involved, and I think they have a lot at stake as much as the city or the county or the township. So I think that, we get the university to help out, getting the word out, and maybe providing some resources to store the information in one location. I know there's facilities for that at the university, Blue.
So how do we coordinate all these entities that want to have the information pulled together? Everybody's got their own website, it's got different information on it. You need to talk with this 501, SI 501 student group that's overlapping with what you're talking to do.
SI 501?
School of Information.
Oh.
I pitched this idea in August, and they took it up. And it's going to be hopefully an ongoing class project through
This is somewhat public engagement and communication.
Well, if I may, Roger, this is something that we're working on as well.
Yeah, that's right. We have the fourth.
Spencer Weaver from Fourth View, for those of you that I haven't talked with, we were able to do a couple of interviews about a month ago or so that we're looking to kind of roll together into a bit of a teaser video. But we've also been working to see how can we design kind of a central portal so that people can become informed on the issue. And if I may have a little update, the highlight last week was that we actually got in touch with some people at the U of M's chemistry department who were able to give us a little intro on what 1,4-dioxane actually is, so that we can create a short presentation to give people some background info.
But what entity should be the one to pull all this together and coordinate all the volunteer efforts and all the governmental efforts? And to me, it should be CARD, but it shouldn't be anyone. It should be like a staff person on CARD to kind of coordinate what all the various things, so you're not having duplication of effort. If somebody has the best maps, that should be available to all the other websites. And as an information consultant, it's like a no-brainer. Why are we doing all this duplicate effort when we could, come up with some public funds to do that centrally? And of course, that's another reason for the EPA, because right off the bat, you get $50,000 a year for public information.
Well, let's brainstorm over the next month before the next card meeting, because it's noon, so officially our meeting is over. But,
Well, wait, we've got another topic here.
no, it was just additional items if time
Items for
permitted.
anybody else have any comments that they want to make before we leave?
Most people stick around a little bit, if you want to talk to anybody, but we'll be cleaning up the room, but we're here if you talk more.
Did everyone sign the sign-in sheet too? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thanks everybody for coming.
Good job, Jenny.
Yeah, Jenny, good job.
Didn't even need to
Yeah, that was good. Oh, yeah.